Welcome to Year of Connection, a year-long journey toward becoming whole self-connected. I'm your host, Pauline Shu. A new year is a funny thing. For many of us, no matter what has come in the year before, in the blink of an eye, a matter of a second or two when the clock rolls over to midnight, we suddenly have a clean, fresh year stretching out before us, full of possibility and excitement. It is merely symbolic, and yet that symbolism of seeing that date 1-1, the first day in the first month of a new year, is significant. It calls us to dream, to set goals, to define. For me, I'm defining this year as the year of connection. And in this first episode, we'll talk about what is connection and why it's so important. You'll walk away with an actionable step toward deeper connections with loved ones, with strangers, and, most importantly, with yourself. So, what is connection? If you're listening to this, you've probably been to my website and seen the description. We're not talking about the business networking kind of connection. We're not talking about connecting with people on social media. This is a journey toward deep, soulful, human connection. So the short answer to what is connection is that it's a relationship. Between two people, connections mean personal interest, a relationship based on common humanity. Many of us, on a daily basis, have scores of opportunities for human connection. Short, less intense ones like the cashier at the grocery store or the receptionist at the dentist, and more intimate, long-term ones in our parents, spouses, friends, children, even colleagues. There's also one that we too often ignore, a connection with the core of our own self. But in an increasingly impersonal world, as a society, we seem to have lost the true feeling of connection. Too often I see people acting out a version of connection that looks a whole lot more like a transaction than a relationship. People at front desks of offices simply saying cursory hellos and swiping their credit card to pay for a service. Parents buying toys for children that will keep the kids busy so the parents can work, not toys that they can play with all together. Or interactions between friends and colleagues moving away from face-to-face and onto social media or email only. Now, to be clear, I don't have a problem with these behaviors in small doses. Sometimes they're even necessary, but we must stop using them to take the place of true connection. Now, why is connection so important? Well, when we return to meaningful human relationships based on the values that matter to us most, with no material goods or superficial transactions between them, we are happier and sustainably so. It's not a fleeting spike of the rush of a reward from a purchase, but soul-deep happiness. So that's the answer to why it's so important. It's simple because it makes us happy. But of course, that's easier said than done, as is often the case. Unlearning years of social conditioning is hard. Figuring out what matters most to you can be a challenge. Breaking apart the old structures of relationships and creating new ones can be downright painful. So, we are going to take it one step at a time. This first episode, this first week, is about collecting our thoughts in a very visual way, whether in a notebook or on just a torn out piece of paper or jotted in the Notes app on your phone. I'm asking all of you to start writing down the ideas, thoughts, goals, quotes, anything and everything that you take note of. These can be things that inspire you, that you want to remember to tell someone else, or that simply make you laugh. For the past few years, I've been doing this. Sometimes it was a quote that felt meaningful, other times it was something funny or absurd that had happened to me. At times, it was calculations around the financial viability of a big purchase that I wanted to make. I will admit that occasionally, even a grocery list snuck into those notebooks. But they're full of what might, to others, look like a jumbled mess, while in reality, it was whatever called to me at the time, even the grocery lists. In the middle of last year, I started looking back at those writings, trying to decide on what to do next with my life. I found a few ideas. I considered pursuing them. Some I actually did pursue. I executed on them, I completed them, and was left with sort of a sense of questioning. I felt like the answer to the question was in those notebooks, but I wasn't able to pick the one thing out of all those thoughts and ideas that was the thing. In late November, my son had to have a scheduled surgery. The surgical coordinator called me up to prep me for the surgery and to make sure that she answered any questions I might have before the operation. She was so personable and so personal, listening to me, making sure I knew my feelings and my questions mattered, that later that day, something simply clicked. I realized that it wasn't a single thought or idea or goal from my notebooks that I had been searching for. It was something I hadn't seen because I'd been too focused on the individual components rather than a bigger picture. It was the surgical coordinator's connection to me and her strong connectedness that made everything fall in place. I found what I had been missing. Throughout the years, the theme of connectedness had come up almost constantly on various levels. The sewing circle I wanted to start, it was really about enjoying time with fellow crafters. The socials that I held for moms, where we could all catch up with friends in a relaxed space, was about deepening friendships and finding common ground. Connection pervaded almost everything I thought was worth writing down. Once I figured that out, it was almost easy to identify other core values that I had based on what I'd written. And once I identified those core values, it became so clear to me which connections in my life supported those values and which didn't. I saw the ways in which I wanted to make connections stronger by aligning them with the values that made me truly, deeply happy. And I found opportunities to forge new connections based on those values. It took time to amass enough written thoughts, but that's okay. Everyone has to start somewhere. I still haven't stopped, in fact. I still maintain the practice of writing like this in notebooks. Which brings us to your action this week. Start taking notes on your own life. You can use the same approach I did, where it's just a jumble of thoughts, or you can focus your notes. That's really up to you. We'll regularly come back to this place where you've written down these thoughts, but for now, just begin. There's no right number of words, no perfect medium. I personally prefer small notebooks that I can keep in my handbag, but you're welcome to use whatever works best for you. And there's no correct timeline. This is about taking the first step on your journey to connection. I'll see you next week. In the meantime, I wish you safe travels.